The Aldis podcast is brought to you by Aldis International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Ripley Martin. Ripley is the Chief Strategy Officer at Intelycare. Ripley, welcome to the show.
Hi, JP. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, and thanks so much for coming on today. So Ripley, let's start with yourself, please, as we do with all our guests. Could you give us a bit of an overview of your background in technology and what your journey has been from where you got started, some of the highlight roles you've held along the way? And what's led you to where you are today as the Chief Strategy Officer for Intelycare?
Sure. So it's interesting joining a technology podcast like this, where I've almost always been the business guy, 5 feet away from some technologists. And early in my career, that was working with biochemists. And then I spent most of my time working alongside engineers, either on the mechanical side, the chemical side, or most recently on the computer science space. So I spent a half a decade in kind of big consulting firms. And then I spent 10 years at Philips Healthcare, where I worked in imaging informatics, patient monitoring, bedside algorithms, and home care, which is where I caught the bug toward both the startup landscape and helping fix some of the problems we have around putting the right clinician in front of the right patient in the care setting where they choose to call their most appropriate or most comfortable care setting, which is what brought me to Intelycare.
Thank you, Ripley. So you mentioned you're now at Intelycare. So tell us all about Intelycare, who you are, what you do, mission of the business.
Sure. So Intelycare at its core is a nurse staffing platform. And what we try to do is help clinical professionals who want to participate in the workforce, but they want to do that on their own terms. It helps them find the opportunities that let them lead their lives the way they want to lead their lives and take clinical shifts when they feel like they can and need to take those clinical shifts. So at its core, that's a matching platform between places where clinicians work and people who provide clinical care.
So talk to us in a bit more detail, Ripley, about your role as the Chief Strategy Officer. What does that entail, and how do you bridge the gap between you being the business side, working in tandem with the technology team, as you mentioned in the introduction? What does that look like day to day, and what are the interactions like with some of your customers?
We started the company really around nurses who wanted to take a shift for a day, and doing that in what's called a post-acute care setting. So many of us have family members in assisted living or independent living or skilled nursing facilities. That's where Intelycare really grew up. As you can imagine, from that core, there's a wide range of potential adjacencies you might consider in terms of other types of professionals into those care settings, or moving into a normal hospital setting or home care setting. And understanding where and how to move our platform into those adjacencies is really the focus of where I spend my time. And to do that, you really need to understand both the setting of care and the type of professional you're trying to put into those settings. And if there's still that same type of matching problem that needs to exist across these other potential opportunities as we start to explore our next wave of growth. So that really turns into framing out what those opportunities look like and how fit for purpose our technical platform is to satisfy some of those needs.
Ripley, staying on the topic of the customer base and the impact that Intelycare is having for its users, are there any recent standout examples that you could share with us in the audience, which would best demonstrate how impactful Intelycare has been for its users, what changes, what impact it's making, how it's helping to impact and improve some of the challenges that exist within the healthcare system, whether it be the nursing staffing crisis or improving patient care?
Yeah, I can think of a few examples, both from the nurse side and from our healthcare facility side. Let me start with the nurse example, where we've had a nurse recently who reached out to us to let us know that she'd entered what she thought was the right shift for her, or right shift opportunities for her in the platform. And what she ended up taking as an opportunity with us was not what she thought she might, because the platform put opportunities in front of her that she ended up thinking, oh, that's actually a decent fit, but it wasn't in line with her initial expectations. And that was really driven by the algorithms that we put together behind the scenes, knowing other nurses who looked like that nurse in terms of their shift profile, in terms of the kinds of things that they'd asked for, thinking this opportunity might be well suited for you, and putting those opportunities in front of the clinician that they otherwise wouldn't have offered up on their own. And the same thing has happened on the facility side, in terms of facilities that have indicated that they otherwise might forego a shift opportunity and therefore keep their census a little bit lower than they might otherwise. And because they saw clinicians that were available and the frequency that they were available, those facilities were able to admit more patients into their care setting than they otherwise might have needed to defer. So being able to add clinicians to the workforce that otherwise wouldn't be taking those shifts, and being able to keep facilities at a higher level of census that otherwise might not have been able to take in those patients, has been really rewarding for the team.
Ripley, I want to spend some time now talking about the team and the environment behind the scenes, both on the technology side and the people. I know you're particularly proud of the technology that you guys have built, working with your own code, but also the people that you've brought in to join Intelycare. Can you give our audience a bit of a look behind the scenes, what it's like day to day, from the makeup of the broader technology team to the proprietary tech that you guys have built?
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about the technology team, but almost as important as the technology team are the both clinical professionals and experienced facility operator professionals that provide the business context for any kind of technical business question. So the way that we're set up from a technology standpoint is we have our engineering team that's responsible for the transacting platform that allows us to run our marketplace with a very low latency. And next to that is our analytics platform, where our data science team spends most of their time and our reporting team spend most of their time. So those two teams are set up to work alongside one another, where the transacting environment has to go through all the appropriate dev tests and quality releases before they put their releases into production. And our data science team is able to move much more quickly in our analytics environment to answer business questions inside of Intelycare. And increasingly, we're putting many of those analytics we're seeing out in front of our clients so that they can understand how they're using the platform themselves to see areas for opportunity. That analytics platform also allows us to do A/B tests in terms of different groups of users and how they might engage in the platform, in terms of a price they might see or a way that they might be shown a one opportunity versus another opportunity. We have a configuration in the user experience that allows the data scientists to essentially inform how users engage in the platform. And that allows us to get very real-time feedback around which approach is working a little bit better. That data science team has spent some time in the healthcare space prior, but many of them are actually coming from consumer and e-commerce environments, how user behavior works in the digital world. So that's the data side. On the business side, we've made a business decision to have, I think it's now 2 or 3 dozen nurses on staff managing our clinical quality professionals, to really make sure that the nurses we're working with are what we want to reflect out in the world. And the same thing is true on our senior living facility side, where we've brought in several folks who act as, or have acted in operational roles in our client settings. And we've used that to inform really what our product roadmap needs to look like across both the clinical professionals and our facility experience, where having the data behind the scenes is really only as good as how you contextualize it for somebody that's an end user.
You are listening to the Aldis podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.aldis.com.
Ripley, one of the things that we were talking about off air was how the Intelycare platform is so user friendly that your clients are able to use it without any additional support from Intelycare. There's certain functionalities which are very user friendly and it's quite intuitive. Can you talk to us about some of those features and why it's so helpful on the client side to be able to work with the platform so easily?
Sure. So when our facilities are looking for whether or not to place one of our IntelliPros in a care setting, they're often looking at can they just fill that opportunity themselves with their own staff. So what we started to do is build out a direct employment opportunity where a facility can hire somebody who's come in through IntelliCare into their own workforce. And they can even manage their own scheduling or what's called an internal float pool alongside our IntelliPros. So if you're thinking about that from a data optimization model, you have a client with all these different needs. Some of the employees are paid directly by the facility. Some of them are paid by different agencies. And our clients, so their frontline staff, are able to pick and choose which nurses of which type across which employment model do they want to put into a given shift. And they can do that directly in our flow pool management tools and in our scheduling tools alongside how we manage the staff on our side. So as we think about the future, being able to have these seamless experiences across different employment models is absolutely critical to being able to answer workforce questions across care settings.
I want to finish the interview on getting your perspective on the road ahead for Intelycare, particularly when you look at the next 18 months. Given the success that you're having as a business, the growth up until now, there's a really positive trend, not just for Intelycare, but for the industry as a whole. And you guys are positioned really well to capitalize on the continued investment and demand for such services. When you look at the next 18 months as the chief strategy officer, what are some of the things that you're most excited about? Where do you expect to see growth across the business? And speaking to an audience of technology professionals, what opportunities are there going to be for people to come and join you on this journey?
So many questions in there. Maybe I can take them one at a time and try and walk through that. So in terms of the business opportunity, we were really surprised when we looked at the nurses who were applying to be what we call an IntelliPro, one of our nursing professionals, and how many different care settings those nurses had experience in and where they wanted to work. So bringing our platform to other care settings and being able to bring our nursing professionals to the places where they want to work is mission number one. And that can include any different place that clinical care is delivered. Related to that is we want our health system or facility clients to be able to engage in nurse employment models however they see fit. The nursing or the staffing agency model is something that we think is open for some rethinking. And technology plays a strong role in that, where right now, a nurse needs to re-enter her clinical credentials in any different environment where she wants to work. And the facility needs to re-enter any different opportunity for demand across different platforms. We see an opportunity for decoupling each of these different services and how they engage with one another around a core platform that could benefit from an increased degree of standardization and modularity that many of us are familiar with in more consumer opportunities, but haven't necessarily made their way into a healthcare or workforce management setting. That magic that can exist in cloud-enabled data services don't really exist in the healthcare staffing space today. And we think there's a significant opportunity there. So that's on the kind of client and use case side. In terms of who we need in order to help us make that work, obviously our data science team continues to grow. On the engineering side, engineers who are familiar with cloud architectures and thinking about how to abstract a business problem into discrete technical elements to help us build a services-oriented architecture around this landscape will be absolutely critical. And in growing and evolving our product and marketing teams to be able to articulate those needs and then describe them to both our engineers and our end users about what the benefits are, as all of those stakeholders are coming up that learning curve quite quickly.
Final question for me, Ripley. As the chief strategy officer, you play a pivotal role in shaping the overall direction of the business from the go-to-market strategy, the product innovation, but a big portion of that is building the team and the culture. When you're sat speaking to candidates who are interested in joining Intelycare, what are some of the things that you talk to them about when you're trying to get them interested enough to join Intelycare over some of the other great opportunities available to them?
Sure. So the way I think about that is it really breaks into a couple of different thoughts. There's the what technologies are you going to be working with, especially with a more technical hire. They want to understand what the stack they're working with looks like and making sure that they have access to both the tools and then the data to make those tools operate. So those are things that we can certainly reinforce with them. And then the second around that is really around mentorship. And we have a great architectural leadership team that helps guide what some of those activities might look like. Engineers who are earlier in their career can learn well on the job with people who are a little bit more experienced within that landscape. I can only take those conversations so far because my ability to provide mentorship on the technology side is relatively limited. But what I do like to relate that back to is what's the client question we're actually trying to solve? And how do we do that in the simplest way possible? At the end of the day, we're not in the kind of hammers business looking for nails. We're trying to make sure that we're solving our client need in as simple a way as we possibly can. Reinforcing those non-technical conversations around what are we actually trying to solve? Who are we trying to solve it for? And why are we in a good position to solve that versus somebody else that might be in our ecosystem is a question that we ask ourselves probably 20 times a day. And it's a great way of having a dialogue between the sales and marketing teams, the product management teams, and our technology teams, where a really great day for me is a couple of hours with those groups I just mentioned, either have a whiteboard or a glass window that acts as a whiteboard to solve out exactly what the flow is between the platform and an end user and how we can satisfy some of those needs. I think that's really the way to bring all the various teams together around Intelycare.
Ripley, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your own journey, but most importantly, great insight into what you're doing at Intelycare, the impact it's having for the healthcare industry, supporting nurses, and also behind the scenes look at the technology and the environment. Obviously, a lot of more growth to come, great opportunities for people working in the technology and data space that join you on this mission. And we very much look forward to seeing what you guys can accomplish in the months and years to come.
Thanks, JP. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Aldous Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.aldous.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.